This is From Now On. I'm Lisa Phillips. Just a heads up, this episode contains discussions of sexual assault and coercive control. Some may find it upsetting. We encourage you to take care of yourself. Welcome to From Now On. I'm Lisa Phillips. Before I bring on today's guest, I want to speak directly to anyone listening who experienced trauma at a young age and was never really given the space or support to process it. Maybe you told someone, maybe you didn't. Maybe you were a child trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense to you. And even if you did tell a parent or a trusted adult, they may not have known what to do with your truth. Maybe they froze. Maybe they minimized it. Maybe they loved you, but didn't have the tools to get you the help you needed. So you keep going on with life. You enter adolescence carrying this invisible weight. And no one explained how it might show up later, especially when it came to relationships, intimacy, or even understanding your own body. No one told you that shame isn't something you were born with, it's something taught. No one told you that sex isn't something you give to a boyfriend to keep him happy. It's an experience meant to be mutual, respectful, and safe. And very few of us, especially those raised in religious or abstinence-only settings, were ever taught the most vital thing of all, what consent really means. Consent isn't a confusing gray area. It should be very clear to your partner that you're ready, you're enthusiastic, and it's never coerced. It's not silence. It's not the time to freeze up. It's not obligation. It's not guilt or pressure or fear of being left if you didn't do it. Consent is your right to say yes or no, to change your mind, to feel safe in your own skin, and to be honored for that choice. Today's conversation is one of the most powerful and necessary ones we've ever had on this show. My guest is not only a therapist, she's a mother and a survivor of sexual trauma. She's someone who has done the deep healing work to break the cycles, raise empowered kids, and now holds space for others in ways she never received herself. She's here to help us understand the long-term effects of unprocessed trauma, the dangerous myths we internalize as young people about sex, love, and consent, and how we can begin to parent, partner, and live differently. This one's for the survivor who thought it was just them, for every teen who didn't know how to name what happened, and for every adult still learning how to listen to their own bodies and reclaim their power. Let's get into it. Today's guest is a mental health counselor and a certified clinical trauma professional licensed in Florida. Logan Cooper draws on her personal experiences of domestic violence and sexual trauma, as well as her professional training to provide advocacy and empowerment to fellow survivors in therapy. Her practice focuses on creating a safe environment where clients can heal from feeling defined by their traumatic experiences, allowing them to rediscover their authentic selves and build the lives they truly deserve. I am so grateful today to welcome Logan Cooper to From Now On. Welcome, Logan.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
So can you tell me a little bit about what your dreams were like as a child?
So, when I was a child, I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up necessarily by title, but I knew that people were always able to talk to me, that I really enjoyed like being able to communicate with people. So, I think my first memory of picking a profession was to be a therapist.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you actually enjoyed listening to people
Oh,
and their
yeah.
issues, their problems and
Yeah.
stuff from an early age?
I think
Yeah.
it always felt I think it felt special to me that
Mm.
people wanted to talk to me and tell me things. I think I knew at some level that that was a privilege to be the kind
Mhm.
of person that people can open up to.
Yeah, you were very empathetic.
Yes.
Yeah. So did you go into daycare as a child?
Yes, both of my parents worked full time, so
Mhm.
I was in daycare. I was in daycare up until the point of probably like early adolescence before and after school because both of my parents worked. Yeah.
Mhm. And did something happen to you in daycare?
So when I was a little girl, my mom told me, well, she didn't tell me when I was a little girl. When I was older, my mom told me that I had had an experience at daycare where I told her that the son of the daycare owner had touched me. And we never talked about it again. She told me that her response was to just immediately pull me out of the daycare and never take me back,
That's good.
which I can understand,
Mhm.
of course, was her best effort at protecting me. But I do think the fact that it was never spoken about again was a problem because I think when something like that happens to you, whether you have a conversation about it or not, like your body really does remember those things.
Mhm. But at the time when she told you about it, you hadn't remembered it.
Yeah, I didn't have a cognitive memory of it, but I knew that when she told me, I could feel it in my body. I
Mm.
always feel shame in my stomach.
Oh.
So I know when something has happened to my body because I can feel it in my stomach. And when she told me that, I had wished that she had told me sooner because it
Mm.
felt like it made a lot of other things make sense.
How old were you around that time that she told you?
I think she told me when I was in my either late teens or early
Oh,
20s.
wow, that late.
Yeah.
And what prompted her to tell you?
So I ended up it really is crazy how it's all connected. The experience that I had in the daycare was the initial experience that I had, and then unfortunately, I ended up having further childhood sexual abuse from somebody that was close to me, and I think when it came up, it was coming up because I was telling her things about the abusive relationships that I was in as a
Okay.
teenager. So I think that was maybe her time where she was like, "I should probably tell her." But I do wish she had told me sooner.
Yeah, your mom was very insightful, so she was connecting the dots a little bit
Yeah,
that maybe
yeah.
something from your childhood was, really truly affecting you and you weren't even aware of it.
So she also told me that she had had her own experiences with
Um,
abuse during childhood, and as we know, so much of this is generational.
mhm,
So I think there's a lot of people walking around with unhealed generational trauma that keeps them from being able to open up to their children about it
mhm.
because there is so much shame
Oh, they
involved.
haven't dealt with it at all
Yeah, and it's all
themselves.
connected.
Yeah, and then they probably feel a little bit of guilt, that they couldn't handle their own healing over it
Mhm.
to then help you when you went through it. Yeah,
Absolutely, and as survivors, you can't imagine anything worse than this happening to your
mhm.
child, so
Oh,
it's
no.
almost like I think people are afraid that if they talk to their children
Mhm.
about these things, that they're gonna speak them into
Oh,
existence,
sure.
and that's every parent's worst nightmare, like, it's unimaginable that something
Mhm.
like that would happen to your own child,
Yeah,
especially if you didn't know about it, right? Because
right.
it makes you feel like such a bad mom, how
Oh, for
could I not
sure.
have known?
Oh, yeah.
So
There's
that's really
there's a lot of
sad,
guilt around that.
right?
So
Yeah.
you were maybe 2 or 3 at the time?
So I went into actual school, I believe at 4
Oh,
or
4.
5, so it
Okay,
had to have been before that, the
okay,
initial
okay.
experience. Yeah.
So what were your feelings like going into adolescence? As an early teenager, how were you processing, going out with boys and liking boys, having crushes, and those initial relationships?
So when I think about it, and I do use this word intentionally, I feel like pre-adolescence through late adolescence, I would describe as a very desperate time
Mm,
because I think I was, and I feel like people cringe about that word, but I really don't believe that desperate is a character trait. I think it's a conditioned response to
mhm,
feeling like you don't belong.
mhm.
And what I recall about those years is that I was so desperate to feel like I belonged somewhere that I would have literally done anything
Yeah,
to fit in. I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to have friends and be liked and feel pretty, like
right,
very
yeah.
common things.
Yeah, I was about to say that seems like a very common thing that
Right.
girls are going through in high school.
Mhm.
Boys too.
Yeah.
Just wanting to fit in
Yeah.
and have friends, the right friends.
Right. Yeah, and, like, because I think that time is so important for your identity that I feel like if you go into that time lacking self-confidence or self-worth, you are essentially depending on the other people to kind of tell you who you are and where you
Mhm.
fit in as opposed to you deciding that for yourself, and I think that gets people into a lot of really bad situations.
Because you're not feeling good about yourself. You're
Exactly.
attracting people that also don't feel good about
Right, and then they're
themselves
gonna
and
take advantage of you.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. A lot of times that can happen.
Mhm. Well, and with friend groups too. Like I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of abusive behaviors happens in friends groups,
Oh, yeah.
especially with young women,
With
you
the
know?
bullying
Yeah, with
between women. Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
The bullying between young girls. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, and young boys too. It's a problem all the way around. But
Mhm.
I do think so much of it is because at that age we don't know who we are. And so we find out through other people's eyes, through other people's opinions of us.
And was this a Catholic school?
Mhm.
Okay. And what did they teach you about sex? Did they teach you abstinence or what was the, like, curriculum they would teach you, or did they even have one, like
S
sex ed?
So, no, there was absolutely not a sex ed
Wow.
class. So, when I went to Catholic school from 4th grade through the end of high school. So, in my Catholic elementary and middle school, there was absolutely no discussion about sex whatsoever. And then in my high school, we had a religion class, which would allude to sex, as in from the religious perspective. But
Which
there
is
was
which is shame.
right, and that it's only something that you do when you're married. It's only something done between a man and a woman after marriage for the purpose of creating life,
Okay.
which is a very dangerous, narrow-minded definition.
Well, of course, because you're in school and
Mhm.
kids are just natural
Right.
sexual beings
Exactly.
having these feelings they don't even know how to process.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then put on top of that some
Mhm.
sexual trauma from
Mhm.
earlier on.
Mhm.
So how were you able to navigate that?
I wasn't. It was
Yeah.
the beginning of my sex life was incredibly traumatic. It was a crash landing. I had no idea what I was doing. It was not done for me.
Mm.
Any sexual contact that I had when I was young, I think I felt excited to feel wanted, because
Of
again, I had no
course.
sense of self. So I think I felt really good
Yeah.
to feel wanted and pretty. And then doing the actual acts of sex, I didn't feel like I had any idea what I was doing. So I was completely dependent on the partner to tell me what to do, and I don't think I felt connected during sexual activity
Mhm.
until I was in adulthood, like my
Right.
20s.
Yeah. Whew.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure the boy didn't know what he was doing either.
Um, so the boys that when I became sexually active, the men that I was involved with, I'm sure they didn't have a concept of what they were doing, but I think they were just very focused on themselves and
Mhm.
feeling good, and I
Mhm.
think that's an issue with a lot of boys and men is that they feel like they get their worth out of being in control in sexual
Mhm.
situations, and I think that it was trauma bonding. I think that my early relationships were trauma bonds. And so neither one of us knew what we were doing. And even when I did speak up about it, which I did because it got to a point in certain relationships where my body was responding in such a violent way after that I knew something was not
Mhm.
right. But then when I did speak up at that point, it was basically like it didn't matter.
Right, because your brain is probably putting together the assault from childhood,
Yeah.
and also the boy may not be trying to assault you, but
Right.
if you're not doing, you know, equally looking at each other and taking this experience and pleasing each other,
Mhm.
then you're gonna have an experience where it's just like, "No, he's violating me, he's violating me, he's
Right.
violating me," oh,
Right.
and
Right.
your brain is not gonna enjoy this
Mhm.
at all,
Yeah.
and then you can't speak up about it.
Right. Yeah. I felt like I couldn't say anything because when you don't get that kind of detailed sexual education from your parents, you're either going to get it from your partners or you're going to
Yeah.
get it from media. And
Mhm.
I do remember like watching movies that I absolutely should not have been exposed to as a child. And of course, when you see the way that sex happens in movies, you
Yeah.
learn that for women, it is largely about pleasing the
Mhm,
partner and
mhm,
performing. And I
mhm,
remember at a certain point, feeling like the only thing that mattered about my sexual experience was being sexy to
mhm,
them. Like
mhm.
I needed to give a performance that would please them. And it didn't even matter to me that it didn't feel good. Like I didn't even know what an orgasm felt like
Yeah.
until I was in my 20s. I didn't
Mhm,
even know that I was supposed to be having those, or like
mhm,
granted to have
mhm.
those. It just was all about like, make this man want me, impress him.
Yeah, that's so confusing.
It's a lot of pressure.
Were you taught that sex is shame, or is that just what the underlying message was?
I think in school, sex, unless it was in the context of marriage, was definitely a shameful thing, and you'll have that in a lot of religious environments.
Okay,
But
so when you're a teenager and you're wanting to have a sexual experience with your boyfriend, you're automatically thinking this is a shameful thing.
I automatically remembered that it should be something I don't tell people I'm
Okay.
doing. So yeah, there's
Mhm.
there's inherent
Mhm.
shame there, especially if you feel like your parents haven't talked to you about it at all because shame thrives in secrecy.
Sure.
So anything that's not spoken about, anything that's treated with this kind of aura of secrecy is going to be
Mm.
inherently shameful,
Mhm.
and that's how it feels.
Yeah, and it's really hard to get out of that cycle of feeling that way.
Well, and it's very
Mhm.
confusing
Mhm.
because in one way you're feeling like there must be something shameful or wrong about this, but then on the other hand, you're receiving messages from your partner like, "No, this is what we do. This is what I
Right.
want you to do. It feels good." And also from of course, social media and television, there's
Mhm.
all of this pressure from
Right.
a very young
Oh,
age.
sure. You're not having the proper connection and
Right.
sensitivity with
Right.
it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
nobody is teaching you that sex should be about connection.
Right, and you're not feeling safe in your
Right.
environment. Yeah, things need to change about that.
Mhm.
So looking back at your teenage years, what do you think the experience should be like between young people?
I think that what's important to me as a parent, because I have both a boy and a girl,
Mhm.
is that I teach my children that there's nothing wrong with being a sexual being. I think that teaching children that there's a difference between privacy and secrecy, because I do believe children are entitled to privacy,
Mhm.
but I don't want them learning that sex is secretive. So I
Mhm.
think there's a difference there.
Oh, that's very good to make
Thank
that
you. Yeah, I think
correlation.
it's really
Mhm.
important. And I think that what I want my children to feel in their bodies is empowered and
Mhm.
aware. Like, I want
Mhm.
them to feel like they know themselves enough to
Mhm.
know what they like before they end up in a sexual situation, because so much of coercion is being told what you like, being
Mhm.
told how you feel or what you
Mhm.
should feel.
Mhm.
And I want my children to come into those relationships feeling empowered to say, I don't like that. I won't do that.
Yeah, we want all people to
Yeah,
get to that stage when you're
right.
young to say, "Wait,
Yeah.
that doesn't feel good."
Right, and I
Or
also never, like, for the love of all that's holy, never want my daughter to feel like pleasure is something to be ashamed about. Like, I
Mhm.
want my daughter to feel so free in her body, and as long as there's consent and respect
Right.
and you're being safe, your safety is what I care about, not your image.
Yes, let's talk about that. So what is consent when you're a teenager? Like, what does that look like?
So, consent, first and foremost, should be freely given. And I think that this is why it's important to have conversations about consent before you find yourself in a sexual situation.
Mhm.
Consent should be you telling your partner, yes, I would like to do that because that is something that I like and would enjoy doing with you. And
Mhm.
I think it's really important to remember that consent is not a one time thing. Consent is something that needs to be continued to be acquired
Mhm.
in a relationship. Consent can be taken back. Just because you said yes to someone does not mean you can't change your mind.
Right.
And
Mhm.
I think that consent needs to be informed for
Mhm.
both partners. I think that there's this message that it's very unromantic to have conversations around consent. And I think all of the negative consequences of sexual trauma far
Mhm.
outweigh any like lack of romance
Mhm.
that talking about it would cause.
Yeah, and a lot of times we're talking about teenagers here. So, and quite a few of us have had, trauma
Mm-hmm.
from childhood,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not even aware of it. So
Mm-hmm.
you're in this situation, you're
Mm-hmm.
teenagers and you've given consent
Mm-hmm.
and everything is feeling good
Mm-hmm.
and you're connected
Mm-hmm.
and but there can be a point when the partner can kind of do something to you where you
Mm-hmm.
feel triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you have the right to say, "You know what? This doesn't feel good anymore. I
You
want to stop."
absolutely do. You absolutely do. And I think what happens in so many homes is that there's this pressure to value the adult's emotional experience over
Mhm.
what your body is telling you. And I think people develop an intense fear of disappointing
Yeah.
others or upsetting others, especially if you had like physical abuse in your home.
Mhm.
If you grew up with physical abuse in your home, displeasing your parent, upsetting your parent can be lethal. Like, it's
Right.
very dangerous. You do not want to do that because you've been scared, because you
Mhm.
had so much fear.
Mhm.
So I think that sends this message to our underdeveloped brains that, like, even if something is hurting our bodies, we don't speak up because our pain is not more important than not upsetting them.
Yeah. And you end up going through something that you probably weren't really ready
Right.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hard part with consent
Mhm.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, like, I think consent doesn't have to be complicated. I
Mhm.
think it's a matter of educating people more and a matter of teaching people how to communicate in a healthy way, because there really shouldn't be anything with your intimate partner that you can't talk about as long as you feel comfortable talking to them about it.
Right, but usually what happens is it's like, "Come on,
Exactly.
let's do this," or "You
Yes.
said you wanted to," or like
Right.
that's coercion starting.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where you immediately said, "I don't wanna do this," but then you get talked into it.
Exactly.
And
And
that happens so much.
it happens so much and it happens in a variety of ways. It's not always like, an aggressive, violent
No.
reaction.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes it's more of like a guilt trip, which is
Right.
so unfortunate. Like,
Yeah.
but don't you love me? Like I really
Yeah.
want to feel close to you right now. And it's
Yeah.
like, let's shift that perspective because it should be we want to feel close to each other.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes, like, especially with boys, they're so riled up and ready to go. They're
Yeah.
not thinking about, your feelings or consent or anything else in that moment.
Well, and I think that that is so deeply connected to
Mhm.
emotional intelligence, teaching our sons emotional intelligence, because sex should not be the only way that you can feel connected.
Right, but like we're talking about 14, 15, 16-year-olds,
Mhm.
maybe they should wait until they're a little more emotionally mature, but easier said than done. So why do some women think that it's our job to satisfy the man.
I think that that is literally the world that we live in. I think that's the message we all get. We are bombarded with that message on a daily basis that your job is to look good and to please others. I think women exist largely as objects, and I think that that's a real problem. And I think that you're seeing it so much, in the media. And then I think lack of education in the home leads a lot of parents to avoid conversations about it. And I think girls receive the message so soon in life, like you're supposed to be nice
Mhm.
and pretty,
Mhm.
and you're not supposed to cause any problems. Like be nice to everyone. And I think that it's just almost impossible to escape that unless you have parents that are teaching you.
So what are the lessons of feeling safe in your body?
I think that from the earliest possible age, I think, first of all, it's our job as parents to be our children's safe space. And
Yes.
that means dealing with our own stuff. And I think a
Mm.
lot of parents don't want to face that, like, you have to reparent yourself to parent your children well. So I think it starts at home. And I think it starts with the caregivers. Because if you are somebody who has dealt with your stuff and learned to love yourself, it is easier for you to teach your children these things about, like, it is not your job to please me as your parent. Like, I am proud of you for the person that you are, but it
Mhm.
is not your job to make me proud. It is not your job to save me from my discomfort. Your bodily autonomy, your emotional experience is always more important
Right.
than pleasing another person.
Yeah. I find that's the normal family dynamic though,
Mhm. Yeah, because it's
especially for
generational trauma.
Americans.
Mhm.
Yeah. I heard
Mhm.
a woman talking the other day. It's like, my son's going to be an architect and my daughter's going to be a lawyer. It's like, well, how is it up to you to decide what they're going to be?
I
And
mean
imagine the disappointment if they don't become what the parent wants.
I mean, literally starting at, like, baby showers, we start to place expectations on, like, what's a boy color? What's a girl color? Like, daddy's little quarterback, and it's just absurd. It's absurd. I just can't. Like, it's absurd to me that, like,
It's,
in utero, we start receiving these messages of, like, he's gonna be a little heartbreaker, like, "Oh,
mm-hmm,
she's my little princess," and it's like,
mm-hmm.
yeah, there's so many layers, but I think the stereotypes, I think that gender role behaviors, it's all connected, and I think that we really need to start seeing children just as human
Yeah,
beings.
exactly. Who can think for themselves
And feel for
and feel for
themselves.
themselves.
So circling back to the question, I think that teaching our children what emotional safety feels like in the body begins with us treating them with respect and autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
physically, emotionally. And I think we need to ask our children more questions than we tell them things. Like, I will say to my child, does that feel good for you? Like, even something down to, like, my daughter was wearing a dress the other day, and I noticed that the elastic was tight under her chest. So I said to her, I was like, she felt really pretty in it. That's why she wanted to wear it. But I said, does it feel good on you? Is it feeling too tight? And she was like, no. That's what mattered to me in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel for you? Does it feel good or does it feel bad?
Right. Yeah. A lot of times, girls feel like it's their fault by how
Mhm.
they're dressed.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of times girls are told that it's their
Yeah, they're
fault.
told
Yeah, I
that.
don't even think that girls feel that until someone tells them that. I really
Mm-hmm.
don't. I think that so much of this, that is the exact point, is the question, "What were you wearing?" is insane
Yeah.
to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that telling, like, I overheard, and I did report this person to their manager. I overheard a cashier at a grocery store talking with a customer, and I don't even know how it came up, but she literally said something about, these girls, these middle school girls come in here in these tank tops, and then they wonder why they get molested.
Ugh.
She said that to a customer as a cashier about a school dress code for a middle schooler.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah.
That's insane.
And it's so unfortunate. I think a lot of people feel that way, think that
Yeah.
way.
And it's like
Mm-hmm.
you should absolutely be wearing things that you feel good about, and, like,
Mm-hmm.
that
Regardless of what you're wearing, no one
right.
deserves to be molested.
Nobody deserves to be violated in any way, shape, or form. So to suggest that it's about what you were wearing or how much you were drinking or where you were, it is all so completely unrelated to the act of sexual assault. People get assaulted because other people assault them.
Yeah. And this is an older person that said that,
Mhm.
but I've actually heard young boys say almost the same thing.
Mhm.
when they see a girl dressed a certain way
Mhm.
at school, they'll be like,
Mhm.
"Why is she dressed like that?"
And I think that
And I don't think they're thinking that she deserves to be molested or touched or anything like that, but a lot of times it's just ingrained in young boys that, if she's dressed like that, she must, like, be more sexually free or just be that type of girl.
I think that it is very important that we raise emotionally intelligent sons and I think or boys, and I think that a huge part of that is teaching them about, self-control and
Mhm,
responsibility and accountability,
mhm,
and I think that when I hear boys or men make comments like that, I know it's because they've been taught that, and then
mhm.
I also think, "What a
Yeah,
cop out." Like, what a
right,
cowardly perspective.
right, mhm. I know. Living in Palos Verdes,
Mm,
though, where I live, it's just like a lot of the girls dress like that, and it's
mhm,
just like a back and forth problem
mhm,
of, like, they should dress the way they wanna dress,
mhm,
and boys just need to learn self-control,
mhm, mhm,
and they I think they are learning that,
mhm, mhm,
but that has to be supported by,
mhm.
the movies and the TV shows,
Mhm, mhm.
maybe the porn they're looking with each other, stuff like that. They're getting the complete opposite message all the time.
Well, and I think also it's important to remember that boys are also being taught coercion
Mhm.
because I think we tend to treat boys like they're subhuman, that they're just supposed to experience like happy and anger. Like they have such a limited
Right.
existence because there's these traditional gender roles placed on them that I feel like they don't feel like they can have the space for self-expression either.
Mm.
Like my son, he was in, I think he's in pre-K now. So this was in a daycare when he came home and told me that one of his friends said that boys couldn't wear nail polish.
Mhm.
And I was like, that is so sad.
Was he
Be-
wearing nail polish?
no,
Oh,
but it was just a boy talking about it in his class. But like, my point is, if my son
yeah.
wants to paint his nails, I'm going to let him do it because
Right.
that's absurd. And if it's something
Mhm.
that makes a boy feel good about himself, boys who are raised self confident and
Mhm.
boys who love themselves, I think, are less inclined to take their lack of self confidence and out on other people.
Right, yeah. Well, that boy got that from the parent,
Right, of course.
that they're not allowed to wear,
Mhm,
that's funny you say that because my child, when he was, like, in 2nd grade, the principal called this is in New York, we
mhm.
lived in New York, the principal called and said, "Leaf is wearing black nail polish." I was like, "So? Why are you calling
What's your
me?"
point?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Did he do something? Because what's the point of this
Yeah,
phone
I know, I
call?
didn't even get it. I was like,
That's
"So what? He
absurd.
wanted to wear black nail polish for the day, so what?"
That's absurd. Yeah. There shouldn't be boy things and girl
Right.
things. Like, that is insane to me that we are
Mhm.
micromanaging boys' self-expression that much, and then we wonder why they grow up with so much rage. It's
Mhm.
because they too can be objectified.
Mhm.
They can feel like they were not raised to know that it's okay to be vulnerable and sensitive and confused and
Right.
hurt. They are literally just raised to be angry, and then you better take that out in some kind of sport, like,
Right.
"Rrr,"
Well, that comes with the parents too, because when he painted his nails, I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I didn't wanna say anything like, "Oh, boys don't wear nail polish." It's
Right.
like, "Okay, that's, what you wanna do. It looks
Mhm.
good. If you feel
Mhm.
good about yourself, go ahead and
Exactly.
wear it to school."
Exactly.
Right? But that's
Mhm.
where the parents come in and they say, "Oh, take that off. Boys aren't supposed to wear that." And then all of a sudden, they're, like, suppressing who they really are and what they wanna do.
And I think that that's another piece where it's important that we as parents check our own baggage and
Mhm.
discomfort. Because I can tell you that even as someone who has done decades of healing work, and I work as a therapist, like it is not my intention to ever make my children feel shamed or uncomfortable. But even I have fallen into the trap of, like, let's say on like a picture day, like you want this
Right.
certain image of your child. And there's nothing wrong with wanting your children to look nice and look presentable, but again, it cannot, the dynamic cannot be that it becomes more important than how the child feels. So
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
it may have to be that you accept that your child's hair may not be perfectly done. It may have to be that you don't like the color that they're wearing
Right.
and you need to deal with that with
Mhm.
another adult.
Mhm.
Not put your child in a situation where they feel uncomfortable so that you feel more comfortable.
So why did you choose to become a therapist?
I chose to become a therapist initially because it felt really sacred to me to be a person that people went to. And then after my own experiences with both domestic violence and sexual trauma and not being believed, because that's the thing, like I wasn't believed about my sexual trauma. And I think people need to realize that the way that your sexual trauma is handled
Mhm.
is just as important as the experience itself and can go either way and how a person heals. So I think I was not believed, and I knew how much that hurt me and shamed me, and I
Mhm.
really wanted to become the person that believed others,
Wow, I
and
love that.
that's why I did it. Like,
Yes.
I know personally exactly how horrible and dark it feels to be vulnerable enough to open up about something like this and have people either straight up tell you that you're lying or mock you, because
Mhm.
there are a lot of people that make
Oh,
fun of
yeah.
rape survivors.
Mhm.
So I knew that if I could feel that horrible, like how low that took me, I wanted to be the person that believed others.
Mhm. Yeah, that's basically my story too. Mhm. But your mother believed you, right? In the beginning, she's the one who told you about everything that
So
happened?
she believed me about the experience in daycare, which I obviously, like, I applaud her for trying to keep me safe by removing that. I don't think that it was a matter of not being believed. I think it was a matter of not talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, no one talked about
Yeah.
it. So it
That's that goes hand in hand.
yeah,
Being believed and let's talk about it,
right,
right?
right.
That also makes you feel like you really believe me.
Right. And so because I felt like I couldn't talk to my mom about it because we didn't talk about sex in that way, the only people that I was talking to about it were the people my age, or eventually ended up having a really good therapist
That's
who
good.
is the first person that made me feel believed.
Oh, good.
And it felt like oxygen. Being
Mhm.
believed
Mhm.
feels like
Yes, it
oxygen.
feels really good.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it validates what you're feeling
Mhm.
inside.
Yeah.
It's nothing worse than people feeling like what you're saying isn't true. There's
It
just nothing worse than that.
I can't even express how much I need people to understand that there is a reason why rape survivors consider what happened to them worse than death.
Yes.
Because with death, there's an out and you're not
Mhm.
feeling it anymore.
Mhm.
With rape, especially if people have not believed you, it just lives under your skin and it steals your soul.
Mhm.
So I knew that the first thing that I wanted to do as a therapist was make others feel
Yeah.
safe and believed.
So while in undergrad, you became a rape recovery advocate.
Mhm.
Can you explain what that is and why you became one?
Absolutely. So I got involved with volunteering with a nonprofit that serves survivors of sexual trauma. And I went on their website, to find out what they were about. And I saw this position for rape recovery advocate and that they were welcoming volunteers. Now, for this particular agency, a rape recovery advocate is the person that gets called when law enforcement gets called. So
Okay.
you go out to the scene to be the victim's advocate.
Okay, good.
So I was the person who was literally there next to these people that I'd never met in my life. The first time I'm meeting them, they had just been assaulted, which is the most vulnerable time, right? Of course, there is a lot of training so that you are capable of doing that because it is crisis intervention. This is crisis we're talking about.
Mhm.
So I was the person who would go meet up with the victims, be by their side while they were going through either answering questions for law enforcement and also being with them when they were getting their exam done after to collect evidence, which is obviously a very scary, vulnerable experience. So my job was to believe them and to make them
Mhm.
feel like they weren't alone and that somebody was there to protect them.
And that's a volunteer program.
Mhm.
How long did you do this for?
I did the rape recovery advocate position probably for about a year or two. And
Mhm.
then after I was done volunteering, I knew that that particular agency was where I wanted to be a therapist because I saw what a difference this was making.
Right, but did things come up for you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah, there's a
hearing
lot
other
of
stories?
there's a
Yeah.
lot of secondary trauma
Oh,
involved,
sure.
yeah. So, I just remember having a visceral reaction, like, I remember, like, my
Mhm.
first call out, I'll never forget, and I remember, like, walking into the room and literally kind of feeling like I'd been shocked, like, I
Mhm.
just felt it all over and my tears immediately welling up
Mm.
because it was so raw. Nothing
Mhm.
can prepare you
Mhm.
for that, even experiencing it yourself didn't prepare me for that. So, it was just a very visceral and raw experience, but it also just felt so powerful because I literally just walked up to this person. I told her my name. I asked her if it was okay if I could hold her hand, and she said
Mhm.
yes. And I stood there and I held this woman's
Mm.
hand while she was getting an assault exam.
Ooh.
It changes you. Like, and I've never felt more sure of a purpose in life.
Yeah. Yeah, because in those situations is usually when the victim realizes they really don't have any friends or family to
Mhm.
come and hold their hand or
Mhm.
feel comfortable enough to even tell them what
Mhm.
happened
Mhm.
without knowing the judgment that they're going to have or
Mhm.
they're going to put the shame on you for
Mhm.
it.
Mhm. Well, and it's like Obviously, in those situations, you don't make it about you, like, it is completely about
Yeah,
the
it's
other
about
person's
them.
experience, but I feel like you really do because the body really does keep the score. I feel like you can feel it when you're in the presence of somebody who really understands,
Yeah, oh,
and,
yeah, you can definitely feel it.
like, it feels safe. You there's a
Mhm.
gentleness to it.
Oh, sure.
There's a gentleness to it, but there's also a grit because you have to be a
Oh,
gritty
yeah.
person to survive sexual trauma.
Mhm. Well, that's the whole reason why we have From Now On,
Mhm.
is for someone who's experienced
I
this
love it.
to take it in,
I love it.
because I did so many interviews prior when I could tell that person's never been through the trauma, had no empathy, and I shut down, I didn't even wanna talk to them.
Couldn't agree
So I
more.
couldn't even imagine being in right after the situation.
Mhm.
Ooh, that's a hard time for the victim.
Well, and we
Yeah.
also need to acknowledge that a lot of law enforcement is not
No,
trained to
absolutely
work in
not.
crisis intervention. So there were times as an advocate where I was getting involved going toe to toe with a law
Yeah, I
enforcement
was thinking
officer
you'd have
because
to.
you are not going to talk to this rape victim like that. You are
Mhm.
not, first of all, it's not your
No
job to ask those
sensitivity.
questions. Like their personal judgment about this would come out and it was repulsive to
Yeah.
me.
I've seen so many tapes of that, the way law enforcement talks to,
It's really
right
sad.
after a rape, and they always make it kind of undertone that it's, "What'd you do to provoke this?"
Right. Or that it's even funny. Like there are people that treat this like it's something to laugh about. It's,
"Really?"
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of corruption, honey.
No, no, I believe you.
Yeah,
I believe you, it's just shocking.
yeah, it is shocking.
Is this program in every state?
No, I so this was just through the agency that I worked at. So I would hope, I think every city needs an
Oh,
agency like that.
absolutely.
But I would hope that there's some kind of program in every state. But this was in the city that I was living in, this was the only agency. So we often didn't have enough people, to keep up with the demand because this is something that's happening all day, every day. Like
Mm,
people are getting assaulted. So there's just not enough resources, which I think is something that needs to be more supported. There needs to be more funding for survivors of sexual
absolutely,
trauma.
yes. Yes, and throughout this whole year where you volunteered for this program, for this agency, out of all the calls that you went on, was the majority of them domestic violence from the partner?
When I was a rape recovery advocate, the experiences that I had would be everything from somebody who was attacked in an alley, which is, of
Okay.
course, like the cliche, way it's portrayed in movies, all the way to somebody that they were dating. But I did notice, and it's funny because I didn't actually think about it until you just brought it up, that the calls that I got were rarely from people with their partners. And I wonder if that's because you feel like you can't make that call to law enforcement because it's
Mm,
your partner, right? Because there's this whole concept of, and I was told this when I went to people about one of my assaults with my partner, I literally had somebody say, "Well, he's your boyfriend. What did you expect? Of course you're supposed to have sex with him."
who said that?
A girlfriend of mine.
Wow.
But every friendship that I had during that time was incredibly toxic. We were all in abusive situations. But yeah, that was, and imagine at an age where your peer group is everything to you, being told something like that. And the last thing you want to do is not belong. So,
Yeah.
okay, if my peer group, who's all important to me, tells me, well, he's your boyfriend, you're supposed to do this.
But yeah, but
Okay.
maybe that's okay if you're in a safe relationship,
Right.
right?
Right.
We're talking about abusive relationships here.
Right. But that would require you having a definition of what abuse is. And at
Mhm.
that point in life, so few people have been taught about what is a healthy relationship. Very few people have parents that model a healthy
Mm,
relationship.
that's true.
It all starts at home.
Mhm. That's true. Do you think a lot of sexual assault and sexual trauma occur due to the lack of sex education? I'm really curious of your thoughts on this.
I do. I think that both in the case of the victims and the perpetrators, there needs to be more education around things like consent and coercion. And I think also the concept of control, because I think if we do the work to raise children that are more emotionally intelligent, they'll realize that they don't have to be in control in a relationship to feel safe.
Mm.
And I think that this misconception about you're only safe if you're in control for boys and men breeds this kind of sexual predatory behavior.
Oh,
And
sure.
I think a lack of value placed on safety and consent and even pleasure. I think we need to be able to have conversations with our children about pleasure. Um, I think that I genuinely do believe that there are boys who did not understand that what they were doing was wrong. I genuinely do believe that the harm is still there. There's no excuse for it.
Right.
But yeah, I think lack of education all the way around, lack of open communication within family systems, because I really don't think that it needs to matter whether you're talking to your mother, father, sibling, as long as you're both having like comfortable, consensual conversations. I think that that's very healthy. And of course, you do it at an age where you feel it's age appropriate.
Right.
But I think even my children who are still very young, I'm already teaching them about things like boundaries, consent, um, pressure is the
Mhm.
word that I use sometimes with my children. Like I told my daughter literally the other day about a friend of hers in class, it is not your job to be friends with people that make you feel bad about yourself.
Right. Mhm.
This toxic concept of it's a girl's job to be nice to everyone, even if they're not being nice to you.
Those underlying backhanded comments that some girls will say to
Yeah,
you.
be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
yeah,
times I'll be like, "That's not your friend.
right.
It's really
Yeah,
not." Yeah, pay attention.
exactly.
Mhm.
So, yes, I think that so much of sexual violence could be attributed to lack of education in the home and then the very toxic messages that we get from the media.
Right. Yeah, which is what most kids are watching
Mhm.
and scrolling through.
And then also we need to make sure that we're addressing generational trauma
Oh
and that
gosh, that's a big one.
sexual abuse is very much something that's not talked about. And the amount of clients that I have had who were sexually abused by a family member and they either knew they couldn't speak up because that's just not something we talk about, or they did speak up and they either weren't believed or their parent continued to expose them to the predator because that's your family is insane.
Because they didn't believe the child, or they didn't wanna believe it because this is,
Mhm. I think there's a lot of you not wanting to believe it, and again,
yeah.
I understand that because it is horrifying as a parent.
Right.
I think in order for a lot of parents to have those conversations, those parents who experience trauma themselves need to be able to go to therapy so they can learn how to
Mhm.
talk about it, because I do understand that if you have not processed your sexual trauma, that it is very dysregulating, like, literally to your nervous system, it's
Oh, sure. Like,
dysregulating.
if you're suppressing it for so many years, I mean, it's
Right.
probably 10, 20, 30 years for some
Mhm.
adults, and then you have a child that's is going through this, you almost want them just to suppress it too. Like,
Exactly.
"I did that, you
Yeah.
can do it too."
So I don't wanna talk about it, so we
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
talk about it because
Mhm.
I can't talk about it, and I understand, again, the feelings are never wrong, I validate that fear,
Yeah.
I validate that shame, but it is our job as parents to deal with it so that we can be honest with our children.
That's what generational trauma is.
Mhm,
Is what I just well, you explained it, but
mhm,
having something that happened to you,
mhm,
seeing it happen, not doing anything about
mhm,
it, then the child does that
mhm,
for their child and their
mhm,
child and their child. It goes on and
mhm,
on and on. A lot of times when you talk to survivors of assault, it happened to their parent and then
mhm,
or their grandparent.
mhm.
So it's just something for us to think about.
It's something that
Yeah.
we need to be open about. It is
Hmm.
something that just as much as we are teaching our children about sexual safety, we also need to teach them what sexual harm is and like that you should never be hurting. Like pain and fear and intimidation should never be involved in any type of relationship. That's not
Hmm.
normal. And
Hmm.
that's where a lot of coercion comes in
Hmm.
because you're scared.
Right. And you shouldn't ever be scared
No,
of the
that's
person
not
that you're with.
normal. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand the thing of like some boys and men think they relationship is control.
Mhm.
I mean, you have no control once you're trying to control someone.
But that's exactly why, right? Because it's like if we can't control ourselves, we need to be able to get control somewhere. So and I think it's not only boys and men, I think it's also parents. And this is a
Oh,
concept,
yes, that's true.
so something that I address with a lot of my adult female clients is this concept of disrespect
Mhm.
versus disobedience. And I think that a lot of us were taught that the only way that you can respect your parent or be a good kid is to blindly obey. Like
Mhm.
that is your job. So
Mhm.
I think it carries over into our adult relationships because if you were taught that, you are going to be on one side of that coin. You are either going to be the person like who's sending the message, like, well, if you love me, you're going to do this because I want you to do that, and what matters is that, I get what I want so that I can feel okay.
Mm.
Versus this concept of like, it should be okay to do something that upsets or disappoints your partner in a sexual situation or not. And you should still be able to feel safe.
Mhm. My mom used to always say to me, "You guys were so good when you were little. You did everything right."
Mhm.
It's like, "'Cause we were scared to death of you.
Mhm.
We were so obedient, so
Mhm.
perfect."
Mhm.
But that's not a healthy way to live.
Right. Yeah.
But
No.
but to the parents, it's like, "You were so good. We're so proud of ourselves that you were so obedient."
Absolutely. I know I could not understand more. And yeah, that's that generation, for so many generations, your credit as a parent depended on how your children looked and behaved. So if
Mhm.
your children didn't look nice and if your children were if they were loud, if they what's that phrase? Like children should be seen,
Right,
not heard.
exactly.
Yeah, that was where you got all of your credit as a
Oh, for
parent. Is like
sure.
raising these little soldiers
Soldiers.
who you say jump and they say how high.
Oh, sure.
And like don't get me wrong, I have
Mhm.
a very hard time when my children, like, do something that feels disrespectful,
Right.
but
Same
when
here.
that happens as a
Mhm.
parent, you need to be able to ask yourself, like, are they being disrespectful or are they just disobeying? Because children are going to disobey. Children are figuring out
Yeah.
who they are.
Sure.
They have to be able to push back.
Mhm.
And
And
so
that's okay.
that's okay,
Yeah.
they're human, like,
Mhm.
my son, absolutely feral, like, we call my son Bam Bam, like, I would never bring him into a china shop, I don't hand him anything breakable ever because I know him, but it is
Mhm.
not my job unless he's doing something that's gonna get him hurt
Right.
or hurt someone else. It is not my job to, like, rob him of his wild because that's a part of his personality,
Right,
and I think he's
yes.
gonna have a lot of charisma and make this world more colorful.
But some grandparents don't understand that because 'cause they're more into the to
Right.
kids just obeying everything that
Right, but
right.
quite frankly, that's the grandparents' problem.
That's what I
Yeah,
say. Like,
not
when your kids
mine.
are unruly, your kids
Yeah,
are doing this, it's like, well,
it's called self-expression, and it's very
eh
healthy as long as they're not hurting anyone.
right, exactly. And the most important thing about that is when you're disciplined so hard, you're also loving too, and
Absolutely.
making sure those children know how much you do care about them and love them, how worthy they are.
Yes,
Don't
absolutely.
forget that part of it too.
I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more, and I think that for me, growing up, a lot of discipline involved fear and humiliation, and I think when those feelings become normalized, when you're being taught what you did wrong in a setting that breeds fear and humiliation, you learn that those behaviors are acceptable, and that very much carries through in adulthood, like, all of my partners made me feel humiliated. They made me feel scared and small and like I was lucky that somebody wanted me. Because I think the message that I received growing up was, I'm bad. I did this bad thing or these bad things. And therefore, I'm just lucky that anyone loves me.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that someone wants me because I'm so bad. Who could love me? I think that's very common.
Yeah, so you're saying that was like that from childhood, and then
Hmm.
you'll choose a partner that's like that,
Hmm.
who feeds that same type of feeling to
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I think the generations like, my parents were born in the '40s, and I think their generation, you never had a conversation about what happened. Children are walking around apologizing when they don't even understand what they did wrong,
yeah.
and that is
That was
so
me
damn.
apologizing all the time. I had no idea even to this day, like, what did I do wrong? And this they can't even spell it out for you.
There was a time in my life, and I say this to clients all the time, where I used apologizing like punctuation. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Like literally it was like the end of every sentence. Even asking a question, which is perfectly reasonable in any
yeah,
relationship or in any setting to ask a question, I would immediately
yeah.
apologize because there was a part of me that's like, you should already know this. You should,
Mhm.
which is so damaging. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think the generations where children were never explained, they didn't have anything explained to them. They were just told everything. And I think then this whole concept of like you are going outside to pick the switch that your parent is going to beat you with, which is all too common. You are the one going to the closet to get the belt that you're getting hit with.
Oh, yeah,
That is so awful and
right.
damaging.
A lot of times we don't even realize this till later on in life. I
Mhm.
mean, I didn't realize any of this stuff till I went through EMDR therapy.
Mhm.
And one of my first sessions, I remember I had to go use the bathroom. There was a key, and I accidentally locked the key inside. I came back. I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I locked the key. And he was like, why do you feel the need to apologize so much to me right now? It's not a big deal. I'll go get the key. But then he was like, sit down. We're going to work on this, with the lights for
Yeah,
EMDR
yeah.
therapy.
Mhm.
And realizing that that's just the way I've been with my parents growing up, always apologizing for every little thing that probably wasn't my fault.
Right. Well, and the reality is, honey, and this is something that I literally say to my kids because we can't just assume that kids are going to know. We can't assume they're going to figure it out, although that happens all the time. I explicitly say to my children, because they'll ask me, because even if I don't teach them the message of you're never supposed to make me mad, they hear that at school. They
Oh,
hear it from
right.
their friends
Mhm.
too. So my kids will ask me sometimes after they've done something that they've been disciplined for, are you mad at me? Are you
Mhm.
mad? Which how many of us can relate to that as
Mhm.
adult women? The are you mad at me texts?
Right.
Horrific. So my children will say to me, are you mad? And my answer to them is, even if I am, even if there is something that you do that makes me angry, you are never unsafe. It
Mm.
is okay. Anger is not an emotion that you need to be afraid of. There are no bad feelings. So even if you've done something to anger me or disappoint me, you will never be unsafe with me
Mhm.
because those feelings are mine to deal with, not yours.
Mm.
So I think that we have to be willing to open up conversation with our children where if we want them to understand what is right and what is wrong, we have to explain that to them. And it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to upset someone. You're not a bad person because you've upset someone. That is going to happen.
Right.
And it's okay. You need to be able to push back and say no
Right.
to establish safety in a relationship and within yourself.
Mhm. I love that you talk to your kids this way.
I'm really
It's
trying.
it's basically what you needed and didn't get. You didn't receive that.
I have never experienced anything harder in life than reparenting myself while parenting my
Same here.
children. It is so hard. There's a reason why people don't do it.
But that's how we get healthy children. And that's also how we heal ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
all done together at the
Mhm.
same time.
Right. It's so hard. I really do have empathy for people that are scared to do it, but the reality is that it either ends with you or it carries on to your
Oh,
children,
yeah.
and so, like, even on the days where, because 'cause I'll have plenty of days where healing generational trauma with my children brings me to my knees. I have
Mhm.
days where I'm experiencing visceral anger, rage, shame, so many things that were common for me. That is a cue to me that I need to go do something to take care of myself, not
Right.
that I need to try to make my children alter their behavior to
Mhm.
make me feel better.
Mhm. And that's very important.
Mhm.
So is that why you started doing EMDR?
I did EMDR because I had done a lot of traditional talk therapy, but I was still having nightmares. I've had sleep issues for as long as I can remember. Like insomnia has just been something I've lived with, I think because I didn't feel safe. So at night, I was always very scared. So during my teen and adult years, I was having recurring nightmares about my ex, and they were horrifically graphic. Like there were so many intrusive thoughts, and I just lived in this state of fear. And then once I started the job at the Women's Center and I was hearing all of these stories of sexual trauma, I started having like secondary trauma to the point where my hair was falling
Oh,
out, like
boy.
my stomach was chronically upset. Those are cues that your body doesn't feel safe and that something
Mhm.
needs to be addressed. So I said, like I've talked about it so much, but I feel like it's still living inside of me. Like, what can I do? And I had a girlfriend who was a trained EMDR therapist, and she's like, I think you should try EMDR. And she explained it to me. And at first I
Mhm.
was like, this is weird. Like, what do you mean I'm holding vibrating paddles while
Mhm.
telling you about my trauma? Okay,
Mhm.
but I knew that I at least needed to try it before I judged it. So I found an amazing EMDR therapist. She's one of my top 3 therapists that I've ever had, and she made me feel safe at first. Like, we didn't just jump right into EMDR. We established rapport, and then I did EMDR about the abusive relationship that I had as a teenager, and the nightmares stopped. I had
Wow.
never done,
Mhm.
no matter how much I talked about it, I had never been able to make the nightmares stop.
Well, because it seems like it was in your subconscious.
It was a yeah.
Because wasn't that a situation where you were unconscious?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Because 'cause I've heard this a lot with the Bill Cosby survivors because all of their abuse was, um, they were unconscious,
Mhm.
and a lot of them have that, so they don't even know, they can't remember what happened,
Mhm.
but it's still there,
Mhm.
and those nightmares come out. So you did the paddles, not the
Yeah.
flashlight.
So yeah, like I said, I can't express enough that it's very important that you don't just jump in because
Okay,
EMDR
right,
is
yeah.
very intense.
Very
So I think
intense.
it's important that you take long enough doing the talking part to build emotional safety, and that should be at your pace, not the therapist's.
Mhm,
And I say that as a therapist. I think it's important to establish the rapport. And then I think when you're ready, and they go through the whole protocol to make sure you
mhm.
establish a safe space, then I chose to do it with the paddles because she didn't have the lights actually.
Okay.
So in her office, it was either going to be that I held the paddles or she was going to be like in front of me using her hand.
Oh, okay.
And I needed the space. And that's important
Mhm.
to recognize is that even in therapy, you are still in control. You have the power there.
Mhm.
So my therapist, like I expressed to her, I was like, you having to be that close to me while I'm doing this doesn't feel good to me. I need more space. So for me, the paddles, I was right here. I
Okay.
felt comfortable.
Okay.
And yeah, it was the only thing that worked to make me stop having the nightmares. It's like my body finally felt free of it, which
Yeah,
was transformative.
it is. It really is. Same for me. The only thing that really, really worked for me, just to shift my way of thinking and the way I thought about myself, and the only way that I was able to get real, true boundaries, like almost a personality shift.
Right? Well,
Yes.
because
It.
you're not your
Mhm.
trauma. You're not
Mm-mm.
defined by what happened to
No,
you.
I literally became a different person over a year.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think I think it's really important that we remember how much trauma gets stored in the body,
Mhm.
and I think that you need to understand that it comes down to having a relationship with yourself in the same way you would want to have a healthy relationship
Right.
with another person.
Yeah.
So, if your body is telling
Mhm.
you, "Hey, I'm still feeling this. Like this is still coming up for me." We owe it to our bodies to have them feel heard, to
Mhm.
listen to our bodies.
Right.
So, it would be the same as, like, somebody coming to you saying, like, "No, I know you're telling me that it's gonna be okay, but actually what I would really like from you right now is a hug." Like, it
Mm.
would be the same thing as somebody being like, "Well, I'm not gonna hug you. Like, I don't wanna hug. I don't wanna make contact there. I'll just tell you it's gonna be okay."
Right.
I needed to feel in my body like I was going to be okay. I needed to feel
Mhm.
safe,
Mhm.
and I think that there is only so much we can do cognitively before we're gonna have to really give our body the chance
Mhm.
to do the same processing.
Yeah.
And being in your body can be really
Oh,
scary when
sure.
you've learned to disassociate.
Mhm. Yeah. I didn't realize that I disassociated so often
Mhm.
throughout my whole life.
Oh, yeah.
I can make that face too. It's just yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, so much disassociation. Like I spent so many of years of my life, and for me, it was largely substance abuse. Like
Mhm.
I went
I've gone
so
through that
hard
too.
in
Mhm.
substance abuse where it's like, I don't want to be in my body. I don't
Mhm.
like how it feels in my body. And
Mhm.
I also didn't like looking at my body. I think we as women go so
Mhm.
long without looking at ourselves in the mirror because there's so much shame about what's
Right.
happened to us.
Mhm.
And I think that's so sad
Yeah.
because everyone deserves to feel beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it's also having a partner that supports you and is loving and caring. Because I feel like when you have a partner who doesn't give a shit about you, doesn't want to hear anything about your trauma, doesn't want to talk to you, doesn't even say, "Hey, are you okay?" Like for me, that was like the worst thing. That was retelling me that I'm not worthy of your love and I'm full of shame and all the horrible things I was feeling.
Yeah, so with my partner, with my husband, actually, when we were dating, I there was a situation where we were being consensually intimate and I got triggered. My body got triggered. And
Mhm.
at this point, nobody knew about any of my trauma aside from my therapist. So my husband was actually the first person that I told. And I remember saying to him because I couldn't shake what was happening in my body, like I was crying, my body was shaking because I got triggered, but I was so worried about telling him. And I told him, like, I literally looked at him as one of the most powerful moments in my life. Like, there's a reason this man is the one. I said to him, I was like, I have something that I feel like I need to say to you, but I'm afraid if I tell you this, that you're going to think that I'm too fucked up.
Oh,
That's what I said to him. The
right.
fear of like too muchness, the fear of being too damaged that no one's ever going to want you. And like, he could see the fear and, like, I think this man was prepared for me to tell him that I'd committed, like, vehicular homicide. Like, I think he was ready for me to tell him that I was a serial killer or something. And so instead, I told him what happened, and he was like, "Oh my god, Logan." Like, and
Mhm.
and he literally
Mhm.
just, like he was like, "Can I hold you?" And,
Aw.
like, I could cry.
No, I
Like,
know, but that is the response that you need. Can
it
I
was
hold you? Can I be the space for
It
you?
was we were sitting on my bed, and I was like I was afraid to say yes to him because I had literally never had a man show me that you can be vulnerable and safe at the same time.
Mm.
So, to feel so raw and then have someone be such a safe space, it was miraculous. And so I've that just like it felt like 1,000 pounds lifted off me to finally tell
Yeah.
someone and have him respond in that way. And then the importance of throughout your relationship, because I've been with him for over a decade
Oh,
now,
wow.
I still go to him and tell him, like, "Hey, this is coming up for me right now. Like, I don't need you to tell me anything. I don't need you to fix it, but I just need you to make me feel heard.
Yep, ladies, this is the partner you need.
This is the
This is
partner
the
you
partner
deserve."
you deserve.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, and that's
Safety is a
it's so
bare
funny you said
minimum.
that in the moment you knew he was the one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because for me, when I started the very first time I wanted to share my story, and I was so ready. I had built up the courage to tell my partner who I was madly in love with. He put his hand in my face and said he didn't wanna
Oh,
hear it.
honey.
Yes, and I remember that was the moment I realized he wasn't the
No,
one.
ma'am. Yeah.
Yes. I was like, "Okay, I need to get out of this
Wow.
situation as quick as possible."
Oh,
And I did. I did work on getting out of that situation as quick as I
I'm
could.
so
I mean, it took
proud
me
of
over a
you.
year,
Uh,
but
it takes however long it takes, honey. Like, I
yeah, I
think it's
knew, right? In that moment, though, it was like, "You can't even listen to I'm ready to tell you my story." And he couldn't even hold that space for me, which made me feel like shit.
of course it did, sweetie. Like, of course it did. And it just reinforces all of that shame. And I think, and like, I don't think that I'm idyllic for having this perspective. You deserve somebody who not only like welcomes your vulnerability, like it shouldn't be tolerated. You shouldn't feel like
Yeah,
you're just being tolerated
right.
in a relationship. You deserve a partner who thinks that your vulnerability is courageous. The
Mm,
text message that I got from my husband before I walked in this door is, "You're gonna do great. I'm so proud of you."
love that for you.
That's what everyone deserves, male, female, across the board.
Yeah.
And you deserve that from every relationship,
That's
not
what I'm
just
always looking
partners.
for.
It's
I'm
what you
always looking for
deserve.
that person that could text something just like that, because that would mean the world to someone who has had, so much shame through her life. That's what you deserve.
To go from partners who were your perpetrators and then gaslit you into believing that what happened didn't happen, to go from like that end of the spectrum to going to someone who like my husband, I told him what I wanted to tell him because I wanted to, but like you shouldn't need to share all of the fine details about your trauma for someone to believe that it's legitimate.
Mhm.
And what I love about my
Mhm.
husband is that if I tell him something happened, he doesn't need to do detective work to believe me.
Right.
He believes me because, of course, he does.
Right. Do you know how many men that when I would talk a little bit about my story because it's out there now, and, you know, men would ask me about it. Do you know how uncomfortable it would be with the questions they would ask me? Like, "Why are you asking me that?
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know me well enough to ask
Mm-hmm.
me those," and they all just wanna know what, like, the juice of it all.
Which is
It's
disgusting. That's
disgusting.
disgusting. Yeah,
Yeah.
and, like, let me be so clear, no one is entitled to your vulnerability. People need to earn your vulnerability by displaying that they are safe. Like, people need to earn that. I
Yes.
think we feel so, concerned with what other people think about us or
Mhm.
feel about us that sometimes we can
Yeah,
overshare,
yeah.
and I think that what's important to remember is that your vulnerability is sacred, and your vulnerability is a strength of yours. It's not something to be ashamed of.
Right.
So if somebody's asking you a question and you don't feel comfortable, I want you to remember that like you don't owe them comfort by making yourself uncomfortable. You can say, "I actually think that that's a really inappropriate question. I'm not going to talk to you about that. I'm not answering that."
Yeah, I'm finally to the point that I can do that.
Go girl.
Yeah.
Love that.
In the beginning, it was really hard for me.
I know, it's scary. It's
I
very
almost wanna get up and
scary.
walk away, and it's like, "Is this something I said?"
Mhm.
"Yes."
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've literally like I'm so
"Yes."
unapologetically blunt with men in
Right.
my life at this point. Like
Yes.
I'll literally just be
Yeah,
like, "No."
yeah. I don't even care anymore,
Yeah, good, don't. It's overrated.
but I got that from the EMDR to get that point. So much, like, reconditioning.
EMDR and body work is game changing. There's so many forms of it, of the
Yeah,
body
and
work.
I just wanna say EMDR is very intense.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't cry for so many years. I mean, I didn't cry at all until I started going through that therapy, and the release of crying,
Mhm.
that's
Crying is so
transformational.
cathartic.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I never even knew that,
Yep.
and I cry so much now.
Right.
I
Well,
cry all the time on this podcast
and
because I
that's
just
okay.
yeah, no, I
Yeah.
never used to think it was okay.
Right. I know because it was treated like it was something
Yeah.
shameful and because
Mhm.
you were sent away with your big feelings.
Right.
Like caretakers, again, who haven't done their own work, even if they're not meaning to harm their
Right.
children, will.
Mhm.
Because if you don't know how to feel big feelings, you don't know how to welcome other people's. And like,
Right.
I remember being told either go to your room, like when I would be upset and crying. So I would just be
Mhm.
sitting there alone, not
Right.
understanding what was happening. Or I was told, stop crying or I'm gonna give you something to cry
Oh
about.
gosh, I've heard that.
So many people hear that and it's so damaging. Like I am very pro crying. I'm pro self-expression. If your body is trying to cry, that's your body knowing what's best for
Yeah,
you.
and it
You
is
really can trust your body
yeah, it's a release.
and it should be welcomed. Like
Mhm.
laughing and crying are both
Yeah.
extreme releases and I love it.
That's funny too, because after going through this whole EMDR the last year, I also found like a love for comedy. Like I
Mhm.
watch comedy shows all the time or
Mhm.
specials or go to shows and just
Mhm.
laugh my ass off all the time, and
Mhm.
it feels so healing. And that's something I never really did before. I never watched comedies.
Well, it's so important to know that you can only experience the depth of good emotions at the same depth of, like, bad emotions, and I don't say that in a way like feelings are good and bad, but,
Mhm.
like, you can only experience the depth of joy that you can also experience the depth of, like, grief and sadness.
Right.
So I think that, like, we don't have the freedom to just because I have a very, like, cackly laugh, like, it's loud, I sound like a witch, like and I love it, I love my laugh, it's a trademark, but, like, there are so many people
It's a
who
trademark.
are afraid of, appearing like too much or obnoxious that they
Mhm.
won't let themselves have a belly laugh.
Right.
And some of my most prized moments in my life where I've like, this is kind of the whole point of living are when I am laughing so hard I feel like I'm on the
Mhm.
verge of a neurological event. Like it's like, but you can only experience that if you have trusted yourself
Yes.
enough to go into the
Mhm.
darkness.
Mhm.
Everyone has darkness. We walk around being like, it's just me. I'm the
Mhm.
only one. Like, I can't tell anyone this
Yeah.
because it's just a me problem.
Yeah.
Nothing is just a you
Right.
problem.
Yeah. It's transformative when you let yourself feel these emotions,
Freedom.
laughing like crazy,
Mhm.
crying like
Mhm.
crazy, just going through these real emotions. Let
Right.
it out.
Yes,
As
please.
it yeah, and
Yeah.
well, you have to, look at yourself. And I really believe that the therapist makes all the difference too of making you feel really safe.
Mhm. I couldn't agree more.
Because well, I started saying with EMDR, there will be a couple days afterwards that you are maybe angry and going
Mhm.
through all these emotions
Mhm.
you have to deal with, but after that, like, I don't know for you, but a day or 2 after, then you feel so good.
So I call that a vulnerability hangover. And I call that with I say it to my therapist and I say it to my clients as a therapist. I'm like, you may have a vulnerability hangover and
Yeah,
just know that that's totally okay. And it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It just means your body is processing new information that up until this point, it didn't
it
know was
didn't
safe
know.
to process.
Mm-mm.
So
So that's what it's called,
that's what I
because I
call it.
had many of
Yeah.
those.
I was like, "What is this?" Like, I remember, like, sitting there thinking, like, "What could I call this?" And I was like, "It feels like an emotional hangover."
Mhm.
And then I was like, "Vulnerability hangover." And when I've said it to clients, they're like, "Oh my god, that is what it feels like. It feels like I'm hungover from feeling big feelings."
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. If anything,
Mm-mm.
it means your body is processing out toxins in the same way it does with an alcohol hangover. Your body is just
Yeah.
processing that out. But how wonderful that you have finally let your
Mhm.
body feel safe enough to let it out because that is always better than keeping it in.
Yes. Oh, I believe that. There was something about me a few years ago when I started speaking out that I had to just let it out. And not even know it was the right thing. There was
You
a lot
just
of
have to
shame
trust your
around it, but
body.
I was just like, "I've gotta get this out."
Yes, it has to come
Because
out.
suppressing it for 15 years wasn't good for me
No,
either.
honey,
I
of
could see
course it
all the negative
wasn't.
things that were happening from
Right.
keeping it all in.
Yeah.
And I still have so many people that I know that suppress it. And I just feel like, what comes of the body when you're suppressing so many horrible things that have happened to you and not identifying it and or even just in therapy. It doesn't have to be speaking out like I did
Right.
publicly,
Sure.
but just in therapy, having someone to talk to. How important is that?
Well, to your point, because I wanted to respond to the first comment you made about the therapist being of utmost importance.
Mhm.
If you go to therapy and you don't feel like this therapist is a good fit for you, if you don't feel comfortable with them, please say something.
Mhm.
Please do not force your vulnerability with a therapist that you don't feel comfortable with. And therapy is a highly personal relationship, and you really need to feel like you feel seen and heard by
Mhm.
someone who gets you as you are. The last thing that I want for my clients is to feel like they have to come to therapy and pretend. So, what I would say to anyone listening to this is if you don't feel like it's a good fit, trust that. And it is okay to speak up. It's okay
Yeah.
to say, I don't think that this is a good fit. And a therapist who is ethical and who is secure in themselves should only want what's best for you. You
Mhm.
should never be thinking more about what the therapist feels than what you
Mhm.
feel. So, for me personally, I am somebody who is like probably what somebody would call like an acquired taste of a personality. And I need an acquired taste therapist. And that
Mhm.
person that was the first person I did EMDR with, I am so obsessed with this woman. I could sing her praises for the rest of my life, but she is absolutely not the therapist for everyone.
Right.
And that's exactly why she was for me.
Mhm.
So a good therapist is going to make you feel safe to go into the dark. A good therapist is going to remind you, hey, we can stop this at any
Mhm.
time. You tell me how this
Mhm.
feels for you. They should
Mhm.
be checking in.
Yeah.
Trauma processing, creating safety involves a lot of check in, which
Right.
is consent.
Right. Yeah. They should definitely be saying that to you. Like my therapist would also say, like, I'll go out of the room if you need a moment, like I'll leave right now.
Mhm.
Are you feeling safe right now? How do you feel right now? He's
Exactly.
constantly
What's
making
coming up
me
for you? Do we
mhm.
need to slow down?
Right, and then he'll just sit there and he'll just wait until I'm ready. Doesn't matter if 10 minutes or 20 minutes go by until I'm ready.
I love that you
Yeah.
have a male therapist that you feel safe with because I think that that is so important.
Oh, I don't know. I was looking for months for a female therapist because I felt like I'm only comfortable saying all this to a
Sure,
female. And
sure.
then I found him
Oh,
because he was closer to my house. I was like, oh, I'll give it a try. I'm like so nervous to talk to a man about these kinds of things, but he was the perfect one.
I'm so
Yeah,
glad.
he was so perfect at making me feel safe and putting everything that I needed in a little safe place and only
Well, and
taking it out when I needed to talk about it.
showing you that a man can be safe, like
Yes.
showing again, like that same message
Who
of,
knew? I'm
hey,
just
you
kidding.
can, no, I'm not, no, I'm not. You can feel vulnerable and safe at the same time. Like vulnerability isn't a threat. When you're feeling vulnerable with a man, it shouldn't just be like the vulnerability of fear. It can
Mhm.
also be the vulnerability of safety.
Yeah, that was actually the first person that I started feeling trust again with a man, even though he was just my therapist.
I love that.
It was like he would always say, "When are you ready to start dating? Like, when are you ready?" And like months would go by. I think it was like 8 months went by, and I'm like, "I'm not ready. I'm not ready yet."
Are you
Yeah.
dating?
Well, I did.
Okay.
I did for a little while, but I'm back to not again.
That's okay. Yep, yep. It'll be there when you're ready. They're not going
They're
anywhere, I
not going
promise.
anywhere.
Yeah.
So how can shame be a superpower?
I love talking about shame with clients because I think that what people don't realize because there's so much taboo around shame and vulnerability is the amount of emotional energy that you spend suppressing your shame is the
Mhm.
same amount of emotional energy that you could be using in strength and good. So it's almost like it's like channeling it in a different way because we experience shame and it feels very intense but becomes because it comes with so much secrecy we're like I need to do whatever I need to do to keep it suppressed. And I think that because of that, a lot of us rob ourselves of our natural gifts because I think our most authentic traits are our most vulnerable ones. I think that's where all of our character is. That's what makes us
Yeah.
us. So I think when we've suppressed that or numbed from that, we're robbing ourselves of our superpowers. Like
Mhm.
you and I's ability to have these conversations, this is a superpower that we wouldn't have had we not
Yeah.
been through our trauma.
Mhm.
So it's like, and I don't believe that everything happens
Mhm.
for a reason. I think that's a very toxic message.
Mhm.
But I believe that some
Mhm.
things happen
Right.
and you can choose to use them for good.
Right.
So I think people underestimate how much power and energy they're using to suppress their shame, and they underestimate how powerful they could feel if they let themselves heal it.
Yes. Wow. That's like the story of my whole life coming together in this one little moment. Yeah, once I was able to release that shame is where I felt like I was stepping into a real
To your
superpower.
power,
Yes, and
yes.
when I
Like,
suppressed it for so many years, no.
well,
No,
like,
I was feeling ashamed. One of the last text messages I got from a parent was like, "I'm ashamed of you." And that was just like I remember I stared at that and I had for so many weeks, months of just like, what can I do with this? Like, why does someone feel ashamed? And now I feel so ashamed of myself. But that's not for me to hold on to, and I needed to work through that. And that's why that's so true when you say shame is your superpower.
and, like, I am truly a ain't no shame in my game type of therapist, like,
Ain't
my
no shame in
therapy
my
off yeah,
game.
period. Like, that would be my slogan for my therapy practice.
No,
Ain't no shame in
I
your
like
game,
yeah.
like, to clients. So it's like
Hmm.
and I think it's important to understand that in therapy too, it doesn't have to all be so heavy. Like,
No.
a lot of shame healing in my office happens with, like, dark humor, and, like, my clients will tell me things that they've done or situations they've been in, and, like, we will howl. Like, of course, never at the
Right.
expense
No,
of their
yeah.
trauma.
Right.
But like we will laugh like at this shared sense of like, girl, what?
Yeah.
Like it's and like I have reactions like that in therapy
Hmm.
all the time, or they'll say something and they're like, they'll, like, laugh for the first time because they're feeling safe to be vulnerable about something,
Well,
and, like
because shame is a choice.
right.
It doesn't really mean that because you're shame, you're full of shame, you have all go down this dark and dreary life. No, you can also use that to have this most incredible life.
Well, the funniest people in the world are the most tormented
Yeah,
souls. Like,
comedians are, yeah.
stand-up
Mhm,
comedy is
mhm,
largely rooted in
mhm.
things that people have done that they were once ashamed of, and it's like,
Yeah,
that's so healing.
very
So, yeah,
true.
I think it's just so important to recognize that, first of all, shame is universal. There's
Mhm,
not a human on this planet that doesn't carry some element of it, and it really can be your power and your purpose. You can change other people's lives by helping them understand that these experiences are shared
mhm.
experiences, and it's almost like the ultimate pay it forward. Like,
Right.
clients will say to me, "Thank you for all that you do." And I'll be like, "No, no. Thank you for everything that you've done
Mhm.
because I was holding the flashlight, but you were the one who had to be ready to
Right,
look at that stuff.
right,
I'm walking in it with you. I'm not walking ahead of you. We're in
right.
this together."
So a lot of times you have that shame, but when you hear other people's story or you identify that same, you say, "Oh, well, you don't feel shame in her for telling her story, for finding those similarities." And then a lot of times then you release a little bit of shame, little by little.
And it makes you
Yeah.
feel powerful because you're
Mhm.
not giving your shame that energy anymore. And the people that I look up to the most in this world are the most authentic people
Yes.
that I've ever met. And every single one of them has had some
Yeah.
kind of traumatic experience that they've had to claw their way out of in order for them to access their authenticity. And
Mhm.
that's why in relationships, I think it's so important, whether it's a partner or a friendship, somebody shouldn't make you feel like you just exist to apologize. Nobody's doing you a favor by loving you. You're nobody's burden. They
Mhm.
are lucky. They are
Mhm.
lucky to have you.
Mhm.
Like, my standard for my clients, and you better believe my daughter is going to be like next level. They're lucky. They're lucky. And you're all lucky. Like, in a healthy
Right.
relationship, you're both the lucky
Right.
one.
So I want to touch on the religious side of trauma you experience. Religion and faith can be something really beautiful and helpful for survivors. Yet there is this other side of religion that can promote abuse. What type of religious messages should we be aware of that could be perpetuating toxic sexual behavior?
I think there are several. I think the first and biggest one that I remember is that we're born sinful. I think that that's absurd. Like, I can't believe that there's this concept that babies are bad or manipulative. Like, I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many people I've heard accuse an infant of manipulating their parent by crying. What? Like, that's insane. So I think the
Mhm.
concept of that we are born sinful really puts people on a path of shame, like you should be apologizing for existing, because
Mhm.
literally all you've done at that point was be born. So I think that's an important one. I think that, at least in my experience of the Bible, there was a lot of messaging about women's bodies being something to be ashamed of and be covered
Mhm.
up. Like, a woman is only as good as she is pious and modest. And I
Mhm.
think that that's absurd.
Mhm.
I think, submission, it can be a really toxic message because
Mhm.
I do have friends that engage in more traditional marriages and they
Mhm.
would say that they are in a more submissive position.
Right.
But I think even in that kind of dynamic, it needs to be consensual.
Right.
I think that if a woman is submitting to her partner, that that needs to be something that she has had informed consent about.
Mhm.
So I think that we're born sinful and full of shame, that women's bodies in particular need to be covered up. I think the idea of this authority power dynamic of being like male, versus
Mhm.
female, I think that
Mhm.
that's toxic. And I think the fact that people only promote sex after marriage for the purpose of creating life
Mhm.
is just, it sets you up for that. Doesn't stop people from having sex, just for the record. It just keeps them hiding it. So I think that sex is something that should be approached as if it's something sacred and special and
Mhm.
wonderful and
Yeah.
pleasurable. And I think that we should be taught that our bodies are
Yeah.
beautiful. And I
Mhm.
think that we need to be taught again the difference between privacy versus secrecy. If
Mhm.
you choose to dress in a more modest way, I
Mhm.
want you doing that because that's how you feel comfortable,
Mhm.
not because you think that if you're revealing your body that you're sinful.
How can we as adults begin to become more aware of our bodies?
I think people need to slow down. And I think that that's very hard to do in our society because it's a very like rat race, dog eat dog world. And I think that a lot of us struggle with toxic productivity. We never
Mhm.
slow down because so many of us were taught that our worth was in how much we did, how much money we made.
Mhm. Mhm.
These other quantifiers.
Right, I
So
suffer from that,
me
constantly going,
too.
going, going,
Yeah,
going.
absolutely. And so I think that toxic productivity is something that keeps people from feeling their bodies because if you're busy, it's hard to feel what's going on in your
Ugh,
body.
is that what I'm doing?
Well, not necessarily, honey. But
Mhm.
I think we've all done it to an extent or at what time at some point in our lives. And I think that there is a time and place where you're hustling, right? Like I
Right,
think you do
yeah.
have to hustle, in
Mhm.
some ways. But I think that we shouldn't ever be hustling to the point that we're disconnected from our
Right,
bodies.
okay.
So I think the concept of toxic productivity keeps people from feeling their bodies. I think the amount of time that people spend online,
Mhm,
like,
for
keeps
sure.
them stuck in a comparison trap
Mhm.
where they're not necessarily feeling what's going on inside of them. They're just comparing themselves to this other person and the image that they portray. And I think that with women in particular, it is so appearance driven that women will engage in things like eating disorders,
Mhm.
like toxic
Mhm.
diet culture. And I think that an eating disorder and I did
Mhm.
heal from an eating disorder. I was actually at the point where I was in an inpatient facility as a teen because like I had starved my body literally to the point of like emaciation and I didn't feel my body. Like it was like it keeps you disconnected. It keeps you
Right,
from being in
mhm.
your body.
Well,
So
almost like you're because that's your control, right? You're controlling that because you don't
exactly.
wanna face or you're
Exactly.
numb from the other stuff that you don't want to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that things like eating disorders, gambling, sex addiction, I think
Mhm.
those are all serves as a means of disconnecting from our bodies.
Mhm.
And I think that we need to be able to slow down and understand that like there's a reason why you've had stomach issues your whole life.
Yeah.
There's a reason why your hair is falling out.
Mhm.
Like your body is literally trying to get your attention that something is going on and you can't ignore it forever. It
Yeah.
will put you in the ground.
Wow.
So I think we need to slow down. I think that we need to take intentional quiet time and alone time. I think so much of the human race is petrified to be alone. So they
Oh,
never
yeah.
are. So they're
Mhm.
surrounded by people all the
Mhm.
time because they can't bear to be alone with their own thoughts.
Mhm.
So they never just take a step back and think like, what do I feel about this? Where do I feel this in my body? Start asking yourself, where do I feel this in my body? And you will learn how your body cues you. For me, it's always in the stomach. For
Mhm.
some people, it's in their chest.
And yeah, my throat. Yeah.
You get like the ball feeling.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Or some people's hands get tingly.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
we all have our eye twitching. All of these
Right.
are ways that your body is saying, hey, I
Yeah.
think there's something we need to process. And you can ignore your body's cues. You will
Mhm.
suffer tremendously at some point for doing it.
Mhm.
It will catch up with you.
Well, what are some ways to feel more aware of our body?
So I think it depends on what you feel ready for. So I think not everybody would be ready for something like EMDR,
Right.
right? So
Mhm.
I think I remember when I was healing from codependent relationships that I made myself take every Sunday as an alone and
Yeah.
quiet day.
Yeah.
So I would turn my
Mhm.
phone off. I wouldn't make plans with people. I literally would only allow myself to like be alone at home. And some days a lot of things came up and sometimes they didn't. You have
Mhm.
to learn to like your own company.
Oh, sure. Self-care is so important. Of
Mhm.
doing that not only with a bunch of girlfriends, by yourself.
Mhm.
Taking that time, a few hours, like you said on a Sunday. I do that a lot. It's
I
very
love
healing
it. I
for
think it's
me.
very healthy. And I
Mhm.
think there's other ways too. Like I think, like body movement and exercise is very
Mhm.
important. And I think when people hear the term somatic healing,
Mhm.
they may overanalyze it and think too far
Mhm.
into it. Somatic healing can be something as simple as you letting yourself rock or like dance in your
Yeah.
kitchen, singing, humming. It doesn't have to be some complicated thing. But
Mhm.
what that does is it takes you out of your head and into your
Right.
body.
Mhm.
I think as women too, we also need to be able to look at our bodies. Like, I think it is very healthy for a woman to look at herself naked in the mirror.
Mhm.
And you may experience a
Right.
lot of judgment at first.
Mhm.
But I think if you can be brave enough to do
Mhm.
it and even go one step further, like look at yourself and also feel how your body feels. Like
Mhm.
it may be uncomfortable at first,
Right.
but the reality is it shouldn't be normal for you to feel uncomfortable in your own
Mhm.
body. You
Mhm.
actually deserve to feel comfortable in the one body that you get.
Mhm.
It's safe.
I totally
It's
agree.
safe to be in your body, but
Mhm.
that's something that has to be learned for a lot of people, and it's
Mhm.
okay to have to learn that.
Yeah, it's part of healing.
Mhm, mhm.
Speaking of that, where are you in your healing journey?
So, At this point, I have just recently started with a new therapist, and I
Good.
really like her. We've done about 3 sessions. She does do EMDR and somatic healing, so my next session is actually next week, and we'll be starting EMDR and somatic healing work together.
Mhm.
So I'm looking forward to that. I don't see a time in my life where I'm not in therapy
Yeah.
because for me, a huge part of being a healthy wife and mother is going to therapy and
Yeah.
having somebody hold me
Mhm.
accountable.
Yes.
So it won't always be weekly, but I see myself in therapy probably for the rest of my life, at least once a month,
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
nothing else. So I am able to do a lot more of the work outside of session because I've done it for decades now, but I still think it's very important to at least have therapy as a touchstone.
Mm.
But I can safely say that for me at this point, shame is situational. It's not a state of being. And for me, that is borderline miraculous because I used to literally just live in shame.
Mhm. I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah. So I've had several therapists. Like I was raised by therapists. Therapists have made me who I am. I am eternally grateful for therapy and healing.
Mhm. Well, I didn't have it throughout my life, only in the last couple years, but I can agree with you on that.
I'm really
Mhm.
proud of you.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
because it's hard. It's brave. Therapy is
Whew,
brave.
it's been the hardest year,
Yes, girl.
but
Feeling
so much
feelings is
good has come out of
hard.
it since.
I know, your
Yeah, when you're
superpower.
brave enough to
Yeah.
actually look at yourself.
Well, and you'll find that
Yes.
when you're brave enough to look at yourself, like a piece of that shame is your superpower thing is that once you're familiar with your demons,
Mhm.
there's very little that people
Yeah.
can use against you.
Right.
People miss that. Like the more honest you are
Mhm.
with yourself about the
Right.
things that have happened to you, the things that you've done, and how you feel about it,
Yeah.
the less shame can be prescribed to
Right.
you.
Exactly. That's the powerful part about it.
Yeah. So, like,
Nobody can put it on you anymore,
right?
you
Because they're
know?
like, "Tell me something I don't
Yeah.
know."
Mhm.
Like, "You're
Yeah.
you're just now finding this out
Yeah.
about me? Like, I've been processing this for years. Do you have anything original? Because I actually
Do you
know
have anything
everything that I've
original?
done." Yeah,
Right.
like, you don't even
Mhm.
know some people nobody knows
Yeah.
everything I've done. So it's like, you don't even have the ammo.
Yeah.
Like, I actually had the ammo this whole time. That's why shame is your
Yeah,
superpower. So it's
exactly.
like,
You figure out that you have the ammo.
yeah.
Oh, I love that. When you hear the powerful statement from now on, how would you end that sentence?
From now on, I will listen to my body over what anybody else tells me about my body. I trust my body first. I
Mhm.
trust me over what anybody else tells about me at the end
Mhm.
of the day.
Yes, and you've done a wonderful job of summing up exactly how you can do that
Thank
through
you.
this conversation. Where can people find you?
So on TikTok, I'm Crooked Counselor Cooper. And
Mhm.
then if you want to find me for therapy, you can email me at logancoopercounseling@gmail.com. And I see residents in Florida.
Thank you so much for joining me
Thank you for
today.
having me.
Yeah, this has been feels like a spiritual experience.
Amen, sister.
Amen. This is From Now On. I'm Lisa Phillips. And until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and please remember there is so much strength in speaking out. Special thanks to our amazing guest, Logan Cooper. Elizabeth Wyndham is our senior producer. Christopher Leone is the editor, and Jose Oriana is our studio producer. Our theme music is Many Worlds by Memory Theory. If you have any thoughts, questions, or stories about your own views on topics discussed on From Now On, email us at fromnowonpod@gmail.com. And please follow, rate, comment, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If today's conversation resonated with you and you are seeking more support in your own healing journey, if you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, help is available. Call 800-656-HOPE. If you or someone you know is being trafficked, contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Text 233-733. That's Be Free. PAVE is a 501c3 nonprofit creating a world free from sexual violence and building communities to support survivors. To learn more, go to shatteringthesilence.org. Speak Out, Act, Reclaim, SOAR, is dedicated to providing a safe and empowering space for survivors of sex trafficking to reclaim their stories and stand up for themselves and each other. That's www.speakoutactreclaim.org.